Okay, so we're going with Pfizer, Mud City style. Pfizer and its new hourglass logo, right? And so Pfizer was founded by these two German immigrant cousins, right? Charles Pfizer on the left and Charles Earhart on the right. When Charles Pfizer's father floats him a loan for $2,500 and he sets up shop in Brooklyn, New York. The first product that they put to market is something called Santonin, which is an anti-parasitic that paralyzes parasitic worms called helminths, right? And here they are. These are the eggs of several different species. I guess the mature ones were just too frightening to look at, right? But so anyway, the Santonin paralyzes these mostly intestinal worms and allowing them to be passed through the stool. Right? Gross, but it seems like a pretty good thing, right? And so what they sold was this worm poison wrapped in a candy shell to make it palatable, right? But this idea wasn't new to them, right? Santonin was developed in the 1830s by German chemists, right? And it was reported that by 1843, candy lozenges were available in Germany which contained Santonin. And so now this makes sense because Charlie here comes over from Germany as a chemist, right? And his cousin, Charlie Earhart here, he's mastered the confectioner's trade. And so they're cousins and they get their start with a family loan. And I wondered if this was a family business expanding to America and not some run-of-the-mill immigrant success story, right? Because here are the best-looking coats of arms I could find for these two families. All right, make of them what you will. I have no idea what to make of the Pfizer one here, other than the black and white and the knight's helmet, indicating perhaps a noble status in the family's history somewhere down the line. And Earhart is the same, the feathered knight and the fleur-de-lis, thinking there's some nobility down the line somewhere in this family. But Mud City being the worm-infested paradigm that it is, in my mind working the way that it does, it somehow came to me that it was interesting that Pfizer came into being marketing an anti-parasitic worm lozenge, because somewhere in the back of my mind it came to me that I had heard there were benefits of some parasitic worms, right? And here's some of the benefits, right? They may boost fertility, they may bring relief from allergies, they may reduce symptoms of irritable bowel disease, they could help heal wounds. So I started thinking, wouldn't it be crazy if this Santonin targeted more of these good parasitic worms than the bad ones, thus making the Santonin user more reliant on your other products to help them feel better? Now that they're missing those immune system boosting worms? Because it says here that there are good parasitic worms for you, those other benefits aside, I also read in here somewhere that they may help ward off infectious disease like coronaviruses. Who knows? I don't know, right? But we got the potential health benefits of parasitic gutworms from Wired magazine. New evidence shows gutworms provide protection from yada yada. I mean, it's absolutely incredible. That's a business model. Get rid of something that makes people feel good so they have to come to you to feel better, right? Because it says here that, it does that the Santonin is ineffective in the treatment of tapeworm infestation. Now, I'm not here to look into which worms are good or bad or whatever, but I believe tapeworm to be one of the bad ones, right? So I don't know, right? And it really got me thinking once I came upon this. It was reported that in 1926, Japanese manufacturers were mixing Santonin into nearly all pastry, confections, and tonics as part of a government-sponsored effort to eradicate intestinal parasites. Could that have been a government-sponsored effort to make people sick? Who knows? I don't know. But the idea that Pfizer may have started in such an ironic way, and who knows, maybe deliberately so, right? That just tickles me. But, and now it's time to get back into just who were Charles Pfizer and Charles F. Earhart. Right? And so when looking to see if I could trace the Pfizer family back to some knighthood or nobility, I like to use Genie, right? Of course, yeah, I've used it a lot in my show. And so here we go with Carl Christian Friedrich Pfizer, right? And so he was born on March 22nd. Love that date for obvious reasons, right? In this Ludwigsburg, Stuttgart, Baden-Württemberg, Germany. And so he died October 19th, 1906, which is the same year as the Baltimore Jubilee and actually just a week after. So it's conceivable he could have been there. And if I ever finish the story of the Jubilee, that could be quite amazing. So of course, the next thing I like to do is I first like to go through the paternal line. So I go looking for his father. All right. And this is all it says. There was no picture for his father. They give an estimated birth date between 1757 and 1815. That's like 58 years or something. I don't know. It's crazy. What a wide span of time for a birth date, right? And that his only immediate family is that he's the husband of Caroline Klotz, who is his mother. You cannot go back any further than him on Jeannie, which I think is really amazing in this, the way these families, especially the wealthy ones, trace their genealogies, how important genealogy was to them. Right? And then I noticed that it had recently been updated on July 3rd, 2021. I'm thinking, do you think they knew someone might come looking? I don't know. Is that just apophenia running wild? But, it says it's managed by this Roderick Elaine Alvarez, which I think is kind of interesting, given that these are very German names that we're looking at here, but is managed by an Alvarez. But the same is true, going forward, like looking at Caroline Klotz, and it's interesting that Charles Pfizer's mother's name was Caroline or Carol, seeing that again and again. Right? Hers is the same, updated July 3rd. So certainly it appears to be that there may have been a deliberate attempt to block looking any further back. Because, in basic searches, I did find some family names going back into the 15 and 1600s, that 16th, 17th century era that I've been looking at in the Poe Chronicles, right? So just really interesting that they would roadblock that. All right, but I did. So I went in, I had to find what's the word Pfizer mean. Maybe it means something, right? And so it says that there are 3 people who say that the name is of Latin German origin and it means baker. So that kind of also very interesting in terms of how, Pfizer gets started and what, pharmaceutical companies are. They bake these drugs, right? Right? And so looking further, like Ancestry didn't give me a name or anything like that, but it did just put me onto a list of similar surnames. And going through this, the last one is Panzer. And when I saw that, I was like, Panzer? Like the German tank? Right? Unbelievable. Think again, what is Pfizer today, but not this unstoppable tank of a corporation, steamrolling the world with its vaccines and its medicines. That is really unbelievable. All right, so what about the other side? What about the Earhart side? Since I'm roadblocked on that side. And so Earhart is a name for a courageous or honorable person, right? The name Earhart is composed of 2 German words meaning honor and bravery. So I'm definitely thinking knight, there's definitely knights in the Earhart family line somewhere, right? And it says that from the 13th century, the surname was identified with the great social and economic evolution of Württemberg, or that area of Germany, right? So again, definitely a tantalizing clue that there could be, noble blood behind the birth of Pfizer Pharmaceutical, right? And so where were these 2 men from, right? They were from this Ludwigsburg in Germany, which was part of the Kingdom of Württemberg, which is highlighted here. And now Württemberg became a kingdom under the reign of this Frederick I. And so he was kind of granted this kingdom with the approval of Napoleon, right? And we know how important Napoleon is in this Mud City Paradigm puzzle tree. Thank you again, because with his connections to Westphalia and his brother coming over here and so forth. Württemberg is established as a kingdom under this guy, and I think it's amazing that his name is Frederick Wilhelm Karl, and that Karl Pfizer shares 2 of this guy's name. He's got Karl Christian Friedrich Pfizer. Right? 2 of the same names. And now I know it's very common for people to name their children after reigning monarchs and things like that. But it is also very common that they name their children after blood relatives. And so, again, maybe another tantalizing clue that there could be, nobility behind this. It could be part of a family business moving to America. I don't know. And so it's under this dynasty, of course, that Pfizer and Earhart do move to New York, which is really interesting. So I wanted to see, well, what does Württemberg mean, right? What's a Würten? And so, I mean, here's their flag and coat of arms, but it says that a vert is a man-made hill or elevation as used in low areas to protect farmhouses against flooding. And so, no, I think that's very interesting. So, man-made raised area. So I have to wonder, is there a buried city or civilization underneath Württemberg? Who knows? Catacombs or tunnels or something? And also tying into the flood, they're creating raised earth. That's kind of what I see in downtown Baltimore on Cathedral Hill and stuff. The way that is stepped up, I think that's kind of interesting, right? And so I don't know if it means anything, but now it's time to that's it. I couldn't go anywhere with the family, or so I figure now it's time to just get back into the company itself, right? And so in 1881, in the same year backwards and forward, right, it moves its administrative headquarters to Manhattan, 81 Maiden Lane, right, presaging the company's expansion to Chicago, Illinois a year later. And that by 1906, that magic year again of the Jubilee, sales exceeded $3 million. Right? So during World War I, it actually continues to grow, but it really takes off in the 40s when it develops the mass production of penicillin, right, an antibiotic widely used during World War II. And on June 2nd, 1942, the company incorporates itself in, of all places, Delaware, which I thought was really interesting. It's like, wait a minute, Delaware? They're founded in New York, right? They have a major headquarters in Chicago. Why did they incorporate in Delaware? And so I wanted to see, like, well, where are they incorporated in Delaware? And so the principal office and place of business for the corporation in the state of Delaware is located at 1209 Orange Street in the city of Wilmington. I'm like, wait a minute, Wilmington? You know who else lives in Wilmington? That's right. Our esteemed President Joe Biden lives in Wilmington. Now, could that be a coincidence? Is that, again, is this just apophenia running wild? Could there be any connection to the idea of Pfizer getting this FDA approval and raking in billions of dollars in profits and this vaccine passport when their headquarters is located in the same city that Joe Biden lives? I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's reaching too far, but it's certainly, of all the coincidences to have, that's a crazy one to find, don't you think? I don't know. And so moving on with the story of Pfizer, right, 1950 to 1980, right, its pivot to pharmaceutical research and global expansion, right? And so, penicillin, the price starts to decline after the war, and, not as many people are requiring it. And so they need to find different antibiotics. And so they create a drug discovery program, which focuses on in vitro synthesis, right, to augment its research in fermentation technology. All right, so they're growing stuff in petri dishes and doing who knows what. And in 1959, the company established an animal health division with a 700-acre farm and research facility in Terre Haute, Indiana. And I think that's amazing because not only is Terre Haute the home of the greatest basketball player in the history of mankind, right? And you better believe he sank that shot. Right? It's that they would develop this animal health division, and knowing the connections of these animals to the coronavirus, especially with the winner chicken dinner episode and the in the relationship between chickens and coronaviruses, which also again a major part of that was happening in Delaware. So again, more coincidences, perhaps. Right? But moving on, it says here that by the 50s, Pfizer had established offices in Belgium, Brazil, Canada, Cuba, Mexico, Panama, Puerto Rico, and the United Kingdom. I mean, so really, that global expansion happening. And that in 1960, the company moved its medical research laboratory operations out of New York to a facility in Groton, Connecticut. And now the thing about Groton is that it's home to the U.S. Navy base and General Dynamics Electric Boat, which makes all the submarines for the Navy, I believe, if not all of them, then most of them. And this here is actually the USS Nautilus, the first nuclear-powered submarine, so they tell us. Right? And so, are you trying to tell me that there isn't some form of connection between Big Pharma and the military-industrial complex? I don't know. This is kind of, very interesting grouping in a very interesting location, right? And also Groton, I think, is the place of the only victory that Benedict Arnold had as a leader of English forces. Don't quote me on that, but I think that's true. and so now we're up to 1980, right? And Pfizer launches this piroxicam, a prescription anti-inflammatory medication that became Pfizer's first product to reach $1 billion in revenue. Right? And so the thing about that is, of course, is that piroxicam, was toxic, and it wreaked havoc on the gastrointestinal system and had major skin reactions, created these horrible welts and burns. And I mean, it's really disgusting. I looked into it. Horrible stuff. And they had to pay $345 million. Now, this was in 1993, I believe. I'm sorry, I don't have the date on this. So that's 13 years, after it launches this drug that becomes $1 billion. Who knows how many billions of dollars in revenue that Pfizer generated on this piroxicam, and they only had to pay out $345 million 13 years later. I mean, really crazy, right? And, I think it's interesting that in 1965, John Powers became chief executive officer of the company. Powers, of course, we now know being a synonym for the name Powell, which could be a synonym for the name Poe, right? So again, kind of drawing this thing into the Mud City paradigm puzzle tree through the Poe Chronicles a little bit. All right, and moving on and forward, if you want to really see the development, it's all there. And I just took everything from Wiki, of course, because Wiki, that great gatekeeper that it is always going to give us the straight dope, right? But a couple I wanted to touch on briefly: the development of Viagra, Zoloft, and Lipitor. Not going to really talk about Viagra so much, other than that their patent on it is running out, and they're losing Viagra as a major revenue stream, as they have for the last few years, or several years even. But in 2009, Pfizer paid $2.3 billion on claims that they illegally marketed Zoloft, and that's just in their marketing fines. I'm sure if I went looking for the horrible physical effects and terrible things that happened to people while they were taking Zoloft, the fines would be greater, or I'm sure that's included in this settlement somehow. And with Lipitor, right, their patent expired in 2011, but at the time, Lipitor was the best-selling drug ever. With approximately $125 billion in sales over 14 and a half years, or somewhere close to $1 billion annually with Lipitor. Right? And they did take a hit when they lost the patent, but not so much as they took after this, which was in December of 2006. They had to cease development on this torcetrapib drug, a drug that they were trying to market in combination with Lipitor to lower cholesterol. Right, and it says that in a clinical trial involving 15,000 patients, more deaths than expected occurred in the group that took the medicine. And the mortality rate of patients taking the combination of torcetrapib and Lipitor had 82 deaths during the study, which was 60% higher than those just taking Lipitor alone, which is 52 deaths. So 52 out of 15,000 died just on Lipitor alone, but Lipitor went on to be their highest selling drug ever, $125 billion in sales, right? They had clinical trials to show this stuff was murderous, right? Unbelievable. And so now we're going to get to the good stuff, right? The COVID-19 vaccine. And it says here that unlike many of its competitors, Pfizer took no initial research funds from the United States Operation Warp Speed vaccine development program, instead choosing to invest roughly $2 billion of its own funds. All right, the Pfizer CEO said that he declined money from Operation Warp Speed to avoid government intervention, right? Stating later that when you get money from someone, that always comes with strings. They want to see how we're going to progress, what type of moves you are going to do, right? They want reports, transparency, right, in their investment, right? And he says also that he wanted to keep Pfizer out of politics. Yeah, sure he did. Right? And we'll see how he did with that in a little bit, right? It says in July 2020, Pfizer was slated to be paid $1.95 billion, or roughly $2 billion, for 100 million doses of the vaccine by the U.S. government. So therefore covering their initial investment. Right? The U.S. deal priced 2 doses at $39, or roughly $20 a dose. All right? And the company stated that it would not lower the rates for other countries until the outbreak is no longer a pandemic. Think about that. The longer they can keep this thing a pandemic, the more money they're going to make, right? Because they won't lower the rates. How criminal is that? Get ready to hear that a lot, right? The CEO stated that companies in the private sector producing a vaccine should make a profit. Should they? Right? I mean, this is a worldwide pandemic. All right? Think of the goodwill that could be fostered among mankind. Right? Thank you for agreeing. All right? If you didn't choose to be so profit hungry. All right? In September of 2020, Pfizer announced that they had completed talks with the European Commission to provide an initial 200 million vaccine doses to the EU, with the option to supply another 100 million doses. So at $2 billion for 100 million doses, we're looking at $6 billion in profits above what they above their initial investment of $2 billion. Right? That's crazy. And that's what I want to talk about, the profits. Right? Hundreds of millions in profits, right? The company said its vaccine generated $3.5 billion in revenue in the first 3 months of the year. That's before the FDA approval. You do the math on this, that comes out to, that's $14 billion in the first year. That is astronomical, right? And you have to believe this is going to go higher with the way the stocks jumped, right? People desperate to buy stocks after the Pfizer vaccine. What's next for Pfizer stock after FDA approval? Pfizer stock surges after full FDA approval. Of course it does. Those stockholders, that board of directors, very happy. Right? But, it's not without its own controversy as well. This is unbelievable. In February of 2021, after a year-long investigation, it was charged that Pfizer was employing high-level bullying against at least 2 Latin American countries during negotiations to acquire COVID-19 vaccines, including requesting that the countries put sovereign assets as collateral for payments. Can you imagine that? Leveraging your vaccine for this worldwide pandemic against the sovereign assets of a country, whatever they may be. And I'm guessing that's its resources, gold, or who knows, whatever these countries' resources are. I don't know. But that is absolutely criminal. And this is in Wiki. How is it that this isn't a major story? I don't understand. And it says that because of this, Pfizer fails to reach an agreement with Argentina and Brazil. And now this is getting more interesting with Brazil, because Brazil has a headquarters for Pfizer, right? And then I started thinking, well, all these Germans, creating Pfizer, wasn't there a group of German refugees that sought asylum in Brazil during the 1940s? I don't know. And then that name from the Genie page, Alvarez. And so I'm thinking now there must be some really significant Brazilian Charlie Pfizer connections. If an Alvarez, which could be a Brazilian name, I don't know, has license to manage the Genie accounts. Again, just trying to think these things through a little bit, right? And so again, huge profits, right? But then I found this article from Oxfam International. Now, and so Oxfam International is a nonprofit watchdog group that, champions the poor, right? In poor countries and things like that. And it released this article, Vaccine Monopolies Make Cost of Vaccinating the World Against COVID at least 5 times more expensive than it could be. Right? The cost of vaccinating the world against COVID-19 could be at least 5 times cheaper if pharmaceutical companies weren't profiteering from their monopolies on the vaccine. Right? New analysis by the Alliance shows that the firms Pfizer and Moderna are charging governments as much as $41 billion above the estimated cost of production. Right? That's $41 billion above their overhead. Right? It says here that they're ripping off Colombia to the tune of $375 million for its doses of Pfizer and Moderna vaccines. Right? And it says that despite a rapid rise in COVID cases and deaths across the developing world, Pfizer and Moderna have sold over 90% of their vaccines to rich countries, charging up to 24 times the potential cost of manufacture, right? Before the pandemic, developing countries paid a median price of 80 cents a dose for all non-COVID vaccines. Right, it says, due to a lack of transparency of pharmaceutical companies, the exact cost of research and development and manufacturing of vaccines are unknown. Estimates used in this release are based on studies of mRNA production techniques carried out by Public Citizen with engineers at Imperial College. Their analysis suggests that it could cost $9.4 billion to produce 8 billion doses of the Pfizer vaccine, or roughly one for everybody on the planet. $9 billion. Think about the profit they're making. Right? Or roughly $1.18 a vaccine. Moderna, for some reason, it costs them almost $3 a vaccine. But even still, what they're charging is ridiculous. Pfizer forecasts sales of $26 billion in revenue for $1.6 billion in doses. What it would cost? It would cost just about $19 billion to give everyone on the planet, 2 doses. Right? It's just ridiculous. If there's $41 billion to spare between the world's nations to pay these pharmaceutical companies, is it beyond reasonable thought to think that there may be better ways to spend $41 billion? And if you include the production costs, maybe $45-50 billion, is there a better way? Could there have been a better way to spend this money and to attack this quote unquote pandemic? In ways that didn't include having everyone on the planet get vaccinated? I mean, I don't know. It seems like there could have been better ways to spend this money. Better ways to attack this problem. But the CEOs of the pharmaceutical companies are all standing around saying, no one cares. Like they're Newman in Jurassic Park. And rightly so, because they're operating in a world in which we've allowed this to happen because we've given license to the powers that be to poison us with toxic food, entertainment, and politics, clouding our judgment, right? I mean, that's just what our life is. And so to wrap up this story of Pfizer, I have not one, but 2 cherries to put on top. And the first is regarding Pfizer's spiffy new hourglass logo, right? And which not only resembles the hourglass here, but is clearly 2 triangles, right? And what is a triangle among its many varied esoteric meanings is, of course, it's the Greek symbol for delta. Look at these double D's. Hey, that's unbelievable, Could this be a clue to Pfizer's involvement in a sinister plot to keep this pandemic going? Or is this just more of my apophenia running wild? I don't know. So I'll let you guys be the judge of that, just as I'll let you guys be the judge of this. And this is a story from Newsweek from just about a month ago. As this UK study shows link between COVID and drop in reasoning abilities and problem solving. Right? A study from the UK found links between those who contracted COVID-19 and a decline in their reasoning and problem solving abilities. All right, so make of that what you will. Because I know what it says to me, and it says, just because you don't know the truth doesn't mean you can't have fun with the lies, right? And so until the next one, cheers, guys.